Welcome back to Dish by RMU Culinary, a weekly installment where we show you delicious food. My name is Chef Brad Hinesley with the Institute of Culinary Arts at Robert Morris University in downtown Chicago. On this week's episode, I'm going to show you a meat-free entree. One of the growing trends in the restaurant industry, and one of the trends that we cover in one of our classes at Robert Morris, is meat-free cooking. And so what we're going to do is I've got some cauliflower. And it's a head of cauliflower that I've sliced into about 1-inch thick slices. And I'm going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil and season it with some salt and pepper. And then I've got a mix of dried herbs. So I've got just some Italian seasoning. You can also mix basil, thyme, and oregano together. Or if you've got the Italian spices in your pantry, feel free to use that as well. So we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of that over the top of our cauliflower. And then to finish it, I've got some Parmesan cheese as well. So we've got the oil, salt, pepper, a little Parmesan cheese, which is going to add a little more salt to it, and then the dried herbs. And this is going to go into a 400-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes or until they're really caramelized and golden brown on top. And while that is working, we're going to make a really quick pan tomato sauce with fresh tomatoes. It's that time of year. We've got some really great produce coming out of our gardens and at the farmers markets. So that was the inspiration behind this dish this week. Cauliflower will be coming on in a few weeks, but we have a lot of fresh tomatoes now. So I've got 3 large beefsteak tomatoes, and I'm just going to take the seeds out. So I cut it in half, and I'm just going to fillet the seeds out of the tomato. Sometimes the seeds will add a bitter element to this to a tomato sauce that we don't really want sometimes. So we're going to take the seeds out, and I'm going to cut them into strips or julienne and dice the tomatoes. And I've already done 2½ tomatoes, so we're just going to add this to the rest of the tomatoes. And this is not a sauce that needs to cook for hours and hours. It's going to be very quick. We're going to get a really hot pan going and saute half of a yellow onion, which I've diced, and 2 cloves of garlic. And then I've got some of that same herb blend with the thyme and the oregano and the basil. And we'll finish it with the tomatoes and some white wine. When you're sauteing, it's very important that your pan is as hot as it possibly can be, because we want to get a little bit of color on our vegetables, and we don't want the vegetables to just stew and absorb too much of the oil. So it's very important that we do have a very hot pan. And this is the case even when you are cooking with meat. If you are searing chicken or scallops or any other type of meat, you really want a super hot pan, so that way you get nice color and you get a really good sear on it, and it just doesn't steam or stew in the pan itself. So when the pan is hot, the oil will get a little bit more loose, so it turns to almost the consistency of water, and that's how we know the pan is hot. Also, it's going to start to smoke a little bit on top. This is a great dish. It's something you can make in advance. It freezes well, or you can refrigerate it and have it the next day if you do a lot of meal planning. So we're going to add in our onion and our garlic. And this is going to come together really fast. And I'm going to add in our spices, our herbs right now, just to kind of bring them back to life. If you've got fresh herbs, please use them. They would be great in this. Use them at the end of the recipe. You would add fresh herbs towards the end. But if you're using dried herbs, add them in the beginning, and they kind of come back to life and add more flavor to the dish. We're going to add a little salt and pepper to this. And we're going to saute this for about a minute or 2 just to get a little bit of color on our onions and garlic. We don't want to burn anything. And before we add our tomatoes, I'm going to deglaze the pan with some white wine. Deglazing is a technique, one of the first techniques you learn here at Robert Morris in our fundamentals class. And it's when we add a cold liquid to a hot pan. What happens is then it creates a bunch of steam, and anything that's stuck in the bottom of the pan, which is a ton of flavor, is going to release itself, and we can mix it into the sauce. So we're going to deglaze with some white wine. We want to scrape anything that might be stuck on the bottom of the pan. Let that reduce just slightly, just to intensify that white wine flavor. White wine, you can use a crisp Sauvignon Blanc this time of year. Chardonnay is a great universal white wine to cook with. I wouldn't recommend a sweet wine like a Moscato or Riesling. I would avoid those. Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc would be a good choice for white wines to cook with. And then we've got our diced tomatoes, and these are the beefsteak tomatoes. And we're just going to cook this for about 5 to 10 minutes, just until the tomatoes start to release some of their juices and break down just slightly. So after your tomatoes have cooked down for about 10 or 15 minutes, the cauliflower should be done right about that same time. So we want to get some color on it. I want a little bit of texture on the cauliflower still. So I don't typically roast this to the point where it's falling apart and really tender, because I want to keep it together. But we're ready to plate up. It's a really quick recipe. It's something that you can throw together relatively fast when you get home from work. So we're just going to plate our cauliflower steaks. We're going to put 2 on a plate. And we've got our tomato sauce. Right over the top. And to garnish it, I've got some fresh thyme, but I've also got some heirloom cherry tomatoes. So we're just going to put a few of those on for some freshness and some color. And then I'm going to garnish it with some fresh thyme as well. Here is our final dish, Parmesan crusted cauliflower steak with a fresh tomato sauce. For this recipe and more information on our culinary arts program, please visit robertmorris.edu/dish and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.